ჩამოხედავს შუაფხოს გაიღვიძებენ სერები არაგვზე იბალახებენ ლურჯყაჯრიანი ცხენები ლურჯყაჯრიანი ცხენები
Welcome to Looking into Cultures. I'm Frank Ficini, and this is our host, Cynthia Warren.
Hello, Frank. Today we have a very serious topic. We're going to talk about the Baltic republics, and we're going to try to understand their point of view in terms of the war in Ukraine. Mm-hmm. Okay? What did you think of the opening clip?
Well, I thought I want to have a lot of questions. First of all, the music and how you put that clip together. There were a lot of images. Tell me about it, and how did it all come together?
Well, I saw those images in the Museum of Occupation in Vilnius, Lithuania. I was really shocked.
And when were you there, and why did you?
I was there last year at this time.
And what was your reason for going?
I went to visit a Russian friend who has now left Russia permanently. He left during the mobilization and during this Ukraine war, and he has a lot of Lithuanian heritage, which he proved, so he can become a Lithuanian citizen now. But I also went because I was curious to see signs of resistance or protest against the Russian invasion of Ukraine, because the Baltics obviously are in solidarity with Ukraine. So I want to start out with a question.
Okay.
Are politics and culture mutually exclusive?
I think that a lot of people would like them to be, but I think that oftentimes they're merged together. There's a lot of things that in politics that influence culture. For example, banning of books. That's just one example. Or encouraging a certain type of music or art. That you see that a lot.
Okay. Well, that's exactly what happened in the USSR. There were many republics and ethnicities. However, it was Russian culture and language that dominated and defined Soviet identity. You remember Homo Sovieticus when we did the Ukraine show?
Yes.
So Homo Sovieticus, which was supposed to be the communist ideal of the new man, was a Russian speaker, really, and what carries culture more than language, you know? And so Stalin, who was a dictator during the Soviet period, he called Russian the all-union language. And the republics were Russified by moving populations of ethnic Russians to the other republics.
I see.
So for example, Kazakhstan, where people spoke Kazakh, then ethnic Russians were moved there and everybody had to learn Russian. And these were political decisions. They were not really, so it wasn't divorced from the cultural dissemination was not divorced from politics because they were political decisions. And another really interesting thing is about the arts, because in the Soviet Union, in the Soviet period, they had an ideal called Soviet realism, and they had to show Soviet life as happy, prosperous, and for example, they would have paintings of happy peasants when a famine was going on.
Right, so it's sort of a form of propaganda, would you say?
In a sense, of course, but the other thing was that really serious artists like Dmitri Shostakovich, the composer, he was forced by Stalin to incorporate folk tunes into his compositions. And because they were singable.
Now he composed the music in that clip
Yes,
we saw.
and that music's really interesting because it sounds like hyenas.
Yes.
Have you heard hyenas?
It's very ominous sounding.
Very ominous. And so those jail cells, and the sound of the chorus sounding like hyenas. The thing is that Shostakovich was very criticized by Stalin and very controlled in his compositions. And this particular piece is called The Execution of Stepan Razin. Well, it's really funny because execution, that's why I chose it.
Yeah.
Because of course, if I'm not saying Putin would be executed, but they want him to be tried at the International Criminal Court. So there's kind of a resonance there. But oddly enough, Shostakovich did not really want to compose in the way Stalin wanted him to, but he was forced to. And so Stepan Razin was considered a hero to the Bolsheviks because he had, in something like the 1600s, opposed the Tsar. And the Bolsheviks overthrew the Tsar.
Right.
So they took this old figure from the 1600s, this hero, and Stalin said to Shostakovich, you have to write a chorale about this guy. So Shostakovich didn't really necessarily choose his own musical subjects, Correction. While Stalin did control artistic content, he did not choose this theme for Shostakovich. The cantata was actually written in 1964 after Stalin's death. Its message was subtly ironic, demonstrating that any dissident against the Soviet regime could be executed. So yes, those were political decisions. So our conclusion is that are politics and culture mutually exclusive?
No, not at all.
They are not, yes. Okay, back to the outline. Excuse me. Okay, so we want to talk about the vulnerability of the Baltics to Russian invasion on the basis of three things.
Okay.
Geography, history, and demographics.
Right.
So first, geography. Okay, could we please have the map of the EU border? Okay, see Russia?
Yes.
What are you seeing there?
I see that the Baltic countries border Russia. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania.
And the thing is, Russia's divided, right?
Yes.
Okay, and isn't that a little strange?
It is.
Okay, so that Kaliningrad is what's called a Russian enclave because it's separated. And how it got there was that at the end of World War II, the Soviets were there. So in the Treaty of Potsdam in 1945, they said, okay, you keep it. And the Russians kept that piece. So you can see that on both the west and the east of the Baltics, you've got Russia.
Right, yeah. So that's why they're concerned because of what has gone on with Ukraine, and they don't want it to spread to their countries. They want to keep their countries. They've been occupied for so long that they want to maintain their freedom and self-rule.
Exactly. Could you take the slide off? Yes. And so, I'm sorry, what did you just say?
I said the Baltic countries want to maintain their freedom and their self-rule. They do not want to risk being occupied.
But what they're afraid of, why they're afraid, is because of what's happening in Ukraine.
Exactly.
Right, exactly. Okay, so they've got Russia on both sides.
Yes.
Okay, so, that's...
They feel surrounded.
So whereas we here, we're very far from Ukraine and we can kind of say, well, that's a distant war. Maybe it's not so much in our self-interest. In terms of the Baltics, it's not in terms of self-interest, it's in terms of survival.
Yes,
really.
self-preservation.
Yeah. Okay, can we see the second map of Scandinavia and the NATO countries? So here you see the dark blue countries, and Sweden now is also dark blue. And they are NATO.
Right.
Okay, so what do you see about the border with Russia and Finland? What happened when Finland joined NATO to the border?
Increased the NATO border to Russia.
It increased the NATO border with Russia by twice as much.
So it doubled.
It doubled, yeah. So that obviously did not please Russia.
No.
And so Finland joined in 2023, and Sweden now is part of NATO as well in in 2024. Could you take the slide off? Okay, can we see the first map again? Okay, take a look at that little jigsaw piece, that little red jigsaw piece of Kaliningrad. What do you see sticking out of it?
There's that's the little strip of land that is shared by Lithuania and Russia.
That's right. That's called the Curonian Spit. It's sort of like Cape Cod. It's a very narrow strip of land. Could we have the close-up of the Curonian Spit, please? The close-up. Okay, that's it, close-up.
Yeah.
And the green is Lithuania, the beige is Russia. What do you see, what town do you see at the southernmost point of the Lithuanian
Nida.
part? Nida. Okay, I went to Nida and I actually got a glimpse of the Russian border installation, which was rather an exciting experience.
Sounds like an adventure, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, once I was into this sort of sleuthing of signs of the vulnerability and also of the opposition of the Baltics to Russia, I started, trying to see more.
Yeah.
Could we have the clip of Nida, please? So Nida's on the Baltic Sea, beautiful
Yeah, it
place.
looks lovely.
It's summer resort town, and those are the typical weather vanes, carved weather vanes that establish that we are in Nida. And that's a statue of Jean-Paul Sartre, who used to visit Nida on the dunes in Nida, overlooking the Russian section of the Curonian Spit. So what do you see in the middle there? Those little figures?
Those are the areas where people can explore and walk?
Yes, hikers can go in there, but there were also places they couldn't go.
Yeah.
And part of it was the no man's land. You see the little section, you can't go.
Right.
And then you're approaching the Russian border. And with my zoom, I was quite excited that I could zoom into
You saw the Russian station.
the Russian border installation.
Yeah.
And what do you think of it?
Not very imposing. It doesn't look like much.
No, it's not very big. It doesn't look like much. Take that off, please. Yes, but what do you think is in Kaliningrad on the Baltic Sea?
They have like a military base or a fleet.
The naval fleet.
Yeah.
The naval fleet is there. So they have a military there in case they wanted to invade Lithuania from that side.
Right.
Yes. So that's another vulnerability. Okay. So that's all about geography. And I think I've convinced you that they're vulnerable, right?
Oh, definitely.
So we can see it from their point of view.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, now we're going to go on to the history.
Okay.
So did you know that they were once part of the Russian Empire?
Yes.
And when did the Russian Empire end? Do you know?
Around 1919 and then 1918?
Yeah, about 1918, at the end of World War I. And so then at that time, the Baltics became free.
Right, independent.
And it was the first time they were independent, and they were only independent from 1918 to 1940. Okay?
Right.
Yeah.
World
and
War.
So,
Yeah.
well, no, World War II was, it was about beginning.
Well,
Or we're going to see how this transpired by looking at this clip. Could we see museums of occupation? This is in the Museum of Occupation, and it shows the Hitler-Stalin Pact. 1939, Hitler invaded Poland then.
Yes.
And so they said, Stalin and Hitler said, hey, let's divvy up Europe. You can have your spheres of influence. So the Soviet Union got the Baltics, and instead of just putting bases in there, they just totally occupied. Then they deported people, anybody they thought might resist, and they deported them to Siberia. The dots represent all the detention camps. I lived out there right by that lake, Lake Baikal, and they deported many Jews as well. And this is in the town of Sēsis in Latvia, where they have along the sidewalks these shoes, cast iron or something, that memorialize the deportation of the Jews. And in the museum, this placard said, the Soviet Union refuses to recognize this pact, and contemporary Russia also justifies the Hitler-Stalin Pact by apparently wanting to invade the Baltics. That's what they think.
Right.
They think that's his ultimate goal. Could you put the last image on from that clip? I don't know if you can. No, never mind. Okay, the last image there, of course, was the girl with the colors of what?
Ukraine.
The Ukrainian flag colors, and she was reaching up to
For the European Union. She's aspiring to be, Ukraine wants to be part of the European Union.
Right, the circle of stars, the flag of the European Union, showing that they aspire to be part of the European Union, which of course Russia definitely does not want,
right.
Because it feels that, first of all, it feels that that's its territory, so, historically. And again, we're getting into the history because, if they historically had the Baltics, then they feel like, well, they're ours, the collapse of the Soviet Union, really, Russia lost so much of its territory. It lost much of its territory that it had during the USSR.
Right.
And apparently, to some extent, I don't know Putin's mind, but commentators have said that he wants to get these things back, right? Okay, so that's part of the history. So what do you see about the vulnerability of the Baltics now with regard to their history?
Well, they've been occupied for so many times, and more often than, more years than not. So they probably are dreading that happening again.
Right, they've been occupied more than they've been independent.
Right.
So, and it wasn't even that long ago, So, could we please see the Heads in Riga clip? Okay, I was looking for signs of dissent, or protest. And there's an Art Nouveau part of Riga, Latvia, with these beautiful heads on the tops of buildings. And then all of a sudden I was rubbernecking and I came upon this red portrait of Putin as a death's head. And across the street from that was a memorial to Navalny, who had only been murdered, I don't know.
a couple of months.
I'm not claiming he was murdered. They say he was murdered.
Yeah.
But he died only 2 months before my trip there.
Right.
So there were still memorials out. Now, that was a really tingly experience because I was rubbernecking at the Art Nouveau architecture, and it was dusk. Night was falling.
Yeah.
And then I was just rubbernecking, and then I saw this bright red portrait. And it was that death's head of Putin. And so I took out my camera. What?
It's quite a statement they're making.
Yes, really. And it was on the side of an art museum. But it was right across from the Russian embassy. And I didn't even know it. And so I just turned around to go my merry way, and there was a woman guard in front of the Russian embassy with a gun giving me a very nervous look, like, what's she going to do next? Me. And then I just walked away across the street, and there was I believe it was the Latvian parliament with a huge display of pro-Ukrainian protest signs, flags, and the Navalny memorial. So that was quite an intense experience because it was my very last night in Riga, and I only stumbled upon it.
Yeah.
So that was
must have been quite an experience.
And then also another thing is when I talked to my Russian friend in Lithuania, he texted me, "When are you coming?" I said, "Oh, pretty soon." And I asked him some question about Soviet symbols, and he said, "Oh no, you can't have those." He said they're trying to get rid of all those, So of course the Soviets were there a long time. They imported their culture to the Baltics, and so there were many Soviet symbols. Could we see the Soviet symbols clip? You see here a manhole cover. This is not exactly a symbol, but the writing is in Cyrillic, the Russian script. And my Russian friend loved to look at all these minutiae. He was very, very observant. This says in Lit, which means Lithuania, SSR, which means Soviet Socialist Republic. So this is a manhole cover from the Soviet time, and here we have our sickles and sheaves of wheat on the front of a building, still there.
Yeah.
How are you going to remove this?
They're going to have to get a mason, and it's going to be a lot of work and expense.
Yeah, I can't even imagine how they do it. They must, what do they?
Cover it over, maybe the first little...
Sandblast it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we walked around looking at all these things. It was very interesting. But he recently, only within the past few days, there was an article about a plaque in Vilnius, Lithuania, on the front of a hotel where the great Russian writer Dostoevsky stayed. And there's a quote on the plaque, a quote of his, "Beauty will save the world." And they want to take it down.
They don't want any reminders of anything that is Russian.
That's right. And yet, I mean, sure, they were part of the Russian Empire. So yes, Dostoevsky was writing at that time. So it's not just the Soviet period, it's the Russian Empire as well. So they're thinking of taking that down. And the only regret I have about it is that, to me, the quote, beauty shall save the world, is so wonderful. Because I've always felt that. I'm to me, beauty is the thing that makes me feel the most consoled, just beauty, and mostly natural beauty. Okay, we're going to go on to demography. So we've talked about geography and history. Now demography. What are demographics?
Demographics are the people of a certain country, you know,
the distribution of people,
exactly,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so how many people of certain ages,
right.
ethnicities, race, etc. This is how they define demographics. So could we please have the picture of Learn Russia in the EU? So this is a lovely advertisement for a school in a town called Daugavpils, Latvia, which is right near the border, not with Russia, but with Belarus. And Belarus is sort of allied with Russia, okay? Now, if you had a language school, you probably need teachers, and it would be nice to have people to practice with.
Yeah, a lot of people know Russian.
A lot of people know Russian in this town. This town is almost 50% Russian speaking. So I brought up this picture just to illustrate that there are a lot of Russian speakers in the Baltics. Could you take the slide off? Yes, there's a lot of Russian speakers in the Baltics because in 1991, when the Soviet Union collapsed, of course, you know, I had told you that the republics had been Russified.
Right.
Russians had gone to live in all the republics to work. They'd been there many, many years.
And they're probably, some are, I imagine, were very happy there.
Yes, I mean, it was their home.
Yeah.
So they'd been there many, many years. Maybe new generations had been born there, obviously. And then they're no longer in the Soviet Union. They're in this new republic. So what do you think that the new republics might do with these Russian-speaking residents of these new republics? What might the new republics say to them?
Well, they want them to learn their language of their country.
Yeah, so they didn't automatically become citizens.
Yeah.
They were offered naturalization. And when you're naturalized...
You have to learn the language of that country and the history you need to know about the country.
Right. It's like it's like civics. It's the most basic thing, right? And but the fact remains that apparently there still are quite a number that have never did learn, especially the older people. They never did learn the language. And I'm not sure which of the Baltic republics, but one of them has given some kind of ultimatum that if they don't learn the local language, the national language, within a certain amount of time, they will be deported, even though they had been living there for perhaps a couple of generations, you know. So it's very urgent to the Baltics to integrate their Russian speakers into their nationhood.
Makes sense,
you know? Yeah. So just listen to the percentages of Russian speakers in each country.
Okay.
Estonia, 27%. That's considerable.
Yeah, that's quite a large number.
But Latvia is even more, 36% approximately.
Yeah.
Lithuania is the least at 5%. But could we have the map of Estonia, please? Okay, look at the top of Estonia, the northeast corner, that little village, town near the Russian border. What's its name?
Narva.
Narva is 98% Russian speaking. So it's in Estonia, but it's right near Russia. 98% speaking Russian and 30% Russian passport holders. Could you take the slide off? So Russian passport holders, How do you think the Estonian government feels about that under the present circumstances?
Well, they're concerned because these people have may want to go back to Russia, or they may want to. Russia's very much ingrained in them. So
okay, and if they claimed that they were being abused by Estonia, then Russia,
in Russia's mind, they need to be rescued.
They need to be rescued. They need to be protected.
Right.
Now, I think the statement that the Duma made, if I can find it, I don't think I can find it. The Russian Duma, or parliament, made this statement. It considers all Russian speakers compatriots and worthy of Russian protection. Well, compatriot means what? Patriot?
Yeah, a part of the country.
Yeah, actually means with. So together, it means that you are our fellow citizens in a sense, you know? And so if the people in Narva that speak Russian are our compatriots and they're being abused, we need to go in and rescue them.
Right.
Yeah. So it's another situation where the demographics could make, first of all, make them fall under suspicion by the Baltic governments, because they think they could be a security risk.
Yeah.
They think they could be recruited as foreign agents, foreign intelligence agents. They don't know where their sympathies lie. And some major publication went to Daugavpils, where the language school is, and they interviewed a lot of Russian speakers, and they found that actually the majority of them were not sympathetic towards Russia. But
So
that
do you
wouldn't
think
necessarily matter to Putin.
What do you think these countries will do? Do you think they're going to try to discourage these people from staying? Or?
Oh, you mean the Russian speakers?
Yeah.
Well, no, they're first of all, they're stopping bilingual education, apparently, in order to promote them learning the national language.
Right.
So I guess they had bilingual, and now they want people to speak Estonian in Estonia,
Right.
Latvian in Latvia, Lithuanian in Lithuania. And so they are taking measures, you know, and in the one case, threatening deportation. So it's very, very serious situation. Now, one last thing I want to talk about is Russian provocation of the Baltics and also acts of sabotage. Could we have the Estonian map one more time? Okay. Now you see the line down the middle of the lake. We said that is what?
That is the border, the demarcation in the form of buoys.
Okay, there's buoys there marking the border, and one night in the middle of the night, actually while I was traveling over there, Russia took all the buoys away. And when they woke up in the morning, they saw there were no buoys left. Well, how can you interpret that? It's kind of symbolic.
Yeah, there's no longer a border. They're saying that,
Yeah, no longer a border. Okay, so that's an act of provocation. And there was also an act of sabotage where they tampered with a pipeline under the water in the Gulf of Finland between Estonia and Finland. And they believe that the Russians did this. So why do you think they want to provoke the Baltics?
Well,
Why does Russia want to provoke them?
they're trying to see if they will maybe retaliate.
Okay, so seeing like how far they can push them.
Exactly.
Okay, and the thing is, I mean, I'm sure they don't really want to start a war with NATO.
No.
And yet, you know, it's kind of a cat and mouse game.
Yeah, it could justify if they do decide to invade. I mean, they could say, well, we're going in because they did this, and now we have to retaliate. So.
Yeah. I mean, I think it would have to be a lot more serious than taking away some buoys, let's face it.
No,
you know?
but I mean, it's...
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, the conclusion, I want to say one last thing. Another thing, of course, we're talking about precedent, what happened before. In 2008, Russia invaded Georgia, the regions of Ossetia and Abkhazia. That's 2008. In 2014, Russia invaded the Crimean Peninsula, which pertained to Ukraine. And then 2022, Russia invaded the Donbass of Ukraine. Well, if you were a citizen of the Baltic republics, of one of them, what would that mean to you?
You'd be very concerned.
That you would be next.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So we're trying to see it from their point of view, and I think it's very clear. They have a lot of reason to be paranoid.
Right.
So my conclusion is that they're very vulnerable due to the three things. What were the three things we talked about?
Demographics,
Demographics,
history,
and
geography.
right. Okay, so there's many arguments that show, I mean, many facts, many circumstances that make it clear
Yeah.
they are vulnerable. Now, we're not seeing it from our point of view,
No.
right? I mean, we're far away. You know, we have other reasons, different reasons
Right.
perhaps.
Right. I see.
But we want to see it from their point of view, you know.
Very good point. I mean, it's.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason why, I mean, when I travel, you know, I don't want to like be imposing my cultural values or my viewpoints on the people, the people who live in those countries I'm traveling in.
Right.
You know, I think it's an act of empathy and it's an act of intercultural understanding to do so.
It makes sense.
You know? So anyway, I guess that's about it. I think that we've made our case.
Yeah.
And hopefully that we've illustrated that there is good reason for the attitude and point of view of the Baltics, the Baltic countries, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. Well, thank you everyone for watching Looking into Cultures. And thank you, Frank, for accompanying me in this very serious discussion.
My pleasure.
And I've got right here your dismissal papers
But I'm not a Russian citizen.
in this red dossier.
Okay.
Thank you again for watching Looking into Cultures, and please tune in next time. We will be having a second episode on the Baltics, this time talking about the resistance of the Baltics to occupation and how they use folk culture and the arts to support their resistance. So see you next time in Looking into Cultures.